Hello and welcome to the Alive, Digital Humans and Their Organizations podcast. This series explores themes and topics relating to all things digital and the shift we're experiencing as the digital era impacts our lives everywhere. My name is George Seiler. I'm from the Ludic Group, and this episode is brought to you by the authors of the book Alive, Digital Humans and Their Organizations, published by Navarro and available on Amazon, Kindle, and in bookstores near you. This episode is about AI and our future digital selves. We're joined today by the authors Paul Ashcroft.
Hello.
And Garrick Jones.
Hi there.
With our special guest, Calum Chase.
Hello there.
Calum is an author of multiple books, including The Economic Singularity, the philosophical science fiction novel Pandora's Brain, and most recently, Artificial Intelligence and the Two Singularities. He's also a regular speaker on the promise and peril of artificial intelligence and runs a blog on the subject at pandorasbrain.com. Great to have you with us today, Calum.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Garrick, can you kick us off with
a paragraph from the book?
A paragraph
to provoke.
Indeed.
I'm fascinated by the two singularities, Calum, and I want to talk about those and what they are. But here's something for you to rail against or enjoy. But this is from our book, where we write about the shift to digital. And we say, the digital world has the capacity to unleash incredible human potential by connecting us to each other and to our vast array of knowledge. It promises open democracy and fairer access to resources for all. It enables massive parallel processing for problem solving in society. It lowers barriers to entry for creating new innovations, new businesses, and almost instantaneous launching of new services. These are the positive outcomes we strive for. The dangers to avoid, like the bleak future described in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, include a future in which human life has been almost entirely industrialized, one in which society is controlled by a handful of people at the top of a world state, where the internet and debate is mediated by monopolistic and oligarchical forces, and where rights of access and the rights of freedom of information are skewered by self-serving policies that twist this neutral platform accessible to all into a monster that promotes only the interests of the few. Which of these possible outcomes do you think we're headed for?
The better one. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. I'm unable to rail against that because I agree with it completely.
No.
I think we are going to have a much, much better world, but if we make a mess of the transition, we could end up with a much, much worse world. I think it probably is binary. I think we'll end up with a very good one or a very bad one. And I'm hopeful that we'll end up with a good one, but we all need to be paying attention to what's coming, and we all need to be thinking about the ways to nudge it in the right direction.
Calum, I'm interested in the singularities, the two singularities you talk about. Can you tell us some more?
Sure. So I think the two most important effects of this digital revolution we're all going through, the information revolution, which, by the way, is not the fourth industrial revolution. It may well be the fourth revolution to affect humanity, but it's not the fourth industrial revolution. I think the two most important impacts will come, one, a generation from now, and the other two generations from now, there or thereabouts, lots of leeway. The first is what I call the economic singularity, and that is technological unemployment. I think in a generation or so, most humans will not be able to do jobs because machines will do all the things we do for money cheaper, better, and faster than we do. So that's the economic singularity. I expect it to happen in about a generation. And then a generation after that, we will probably create an artificial general intelligence, a machine which has all the cognitive abilities of an adult human. And because you can always improve machines, it will continue to get smarter and it will quickly become a superintelligence. So that's the technological singularity. So those two singularities are, I think, the most important developments that are coming. And I use this word singularity, which some people don't like because it's got associations of the rapture of the nerds and so on. But it is such a good metaphor because a singularity is the biggest type of transformation there is. All the rules break down when you have a singularity. And also, because there's an event horizon, it's really hard to see what's going to happen the other side. And I think it's a very good metaphor for these two huge changes that are coming.
If we talk about the economic singularity for a moment, what does that mean for everybody who's working at the moment? Because the way the capitalist system is constructed is We've got a bunch of people working. Everybody's earning some money. People are consuming things that are being made by everybody who is making stuff. If that gets hacked by robots, for example, and all the robots are making everything, how are people earning money in order to consume the things that the robots are making? And indeed, take it even back further, why are the robots making things for people to consume in that kind of virtuous circle?
So that's, I think, the central question. How do we provide an income for everybody if people can't have jobs anymore? And a lot of people have the knee-jerk reaction, universal basic income, which I think is precisely the wrong answer.
Why not?
So universal basic income could well be a stepping stone.
Yes.
But it isn't the end goal. Firstly, because all the ways that have been suggested to pay for it don't work. Taxing the rich doesn't work because they hide their money.
Yeah.
Sacking all the bureaucrats who run the current social security systems doesn't work because you'll have to bring them all back again because people need different amounts. And taxing robots simply kills innovation. So all the ways that have been suggested to pay for it don't work. But the biggest problem with UBI is the word in the middle of it, basic. We want much more than a basic income. We all want, and I'd even go so far as to say deserve, a luxurious life. We should have a luxurious life, particularly if we've been smart enough to create machines which can go around producing all the goods and services that we want very cheaply. So I think the answer isn't working out how to generate lots of money to give to people. The answer is working out how to make all the goods and services really, really cheap. And I think this is going to happen anyway. The economy is going to get demonetized as it gets dematerialized. And the great example is music. When we were all young, well, perhaps when I was young, you guys are all very young.
That's very
still,
generous of you.
it was simply impossible for anybody, even a rich person, to have access to all the music they might want to listen to. And now, my son, 17, £10 a month, he can listen to anything he likes. That is a total transformation. Music has been demonetized.
It's also had a huge impact on the musicians, and I feel that acutely because I'm a composer myself. Anybody who has a PRS account will have seen the revenues go down quite spectacularly because of the shift to Spotify and Tidal and all the other providers. And I think that is the dark side of the deflationary impact of the economic singularity. The dark side is that it shifts the economic realities of people's earning potential down the line. Where's the way out of that particular labyrinth?
Well, it's the dark side as long as we're still in a world where you need quite a lot of money to have a good life.
Yes.
What I think the economic singularity could give us, if we manage the process well and get through the panics that it will probably cause, is a world where everybody has access to all the goods and services that they need without much money. So it doesn't matter if you're not earning any money as a musician. And what people would do then is do whatever they want to do. So musicians would create music, and sports people would play sports, and artists would create art, and golfers would play golf. And people will move from one occupation to another as they go through different time stages and different times of the year and whatever they want to do. None of it will be paid, but we'll all be doing work, we'll be doing projects because we want to do them. And that sounds to me like a brilliant world. I want to live in that world.
And it's a world that's been here before. So the ancient tribes of Mayans, for example, we write about this in the book. It was a very successful civilization, no money. They operated a system of trading and bartering of skills, that people did what they needed to do. The work was designed around their lives, and they were hugely successful.
Yes, but they were still subsistence farmers.
They were.
Which is not much of a life, actually.
It's a hard life.
It's a hard life. It's a hard life. And I'd prefer to live in a world where nobody has to be a subsistence farmer because the robot is the subsistence farmer.
Right, yeah. So if the robots are doing the dirty work for us, then we can make music.
Yeah, we can do the fun things. We can do whatever we want to do. And that's where I think we should be aiming for.
Is that motivational? What should I tell my 10-year-old child who's at school and being taught by rote to learn to read and write facts about space and languages? What's he going to do in 10 years' time?
I was going to ask about the value system. What do you value as a society, right?
Well, one thing we should value is education and understanding. And one thing that is clear is that if you live a life of leisure and you know nothing, you'll get bored. if you live a life of leisure and say you're Albert Einstein, you'll never be bored.
Yes.
So a well-stocked mind is the best equipment you can have to live in a life of leisure. So your 10-year-old should learn as much as possible, not only because of what his or her life will be like, in the end state, but also because she is going to live through the early stages of this transformation and is going to have to work for a bit. So, they want a good start in life.
You also want them to understand how to learn and how to be engaged and how to be enchanted by the world so that they can live a meaningful life.
Very much.
And finding meaning in a world which is transformed. And we find meaning in work these days. Many, many people do. Finding meaning in their social status and their social position, and the thing that gives them meaning is the work that they're involved in.
Some people do.
Yes.
Gartner did a survey 2 or 3 years ago in which they discovered that 8% of people, and this was a multinational study, 8% of people really enjoy their work, are really engaged in their work. And a lot of the people who have these sorts of conversations, particularly on podcasts, are in that 8%. And we forget that if you're an Amazon delivery driver or if you work in a warehouse moving peas from one place to another, you may not get very much meaning from that. It'll give you a reason to get up in the morning. It'll fill your day, but I don't think it gives you much meaning. So a world in which that person who's an Amazon delivery driver can instead be climbing up mountains in southern Spain or learning how to be the best golfer that they can possibly be, that's a better world, I think.
Yes.
A lot of people worry that a world without jobs is a world without meaning, and I think that's actually likely to work out to be the least of our problems. Money, or how you have access to the goods and services you need, that I think is the big problem that we're going to have to solve.
Just to critique, is this not a middle-class dream that's being foisted on a unsuspecting public, or is it something that people who are living in Calcutta, maybe not necessarily have much money at all, and people living in Tower Hamlets in London should be subscribing to and should be expecting to come their ways?
It's a dream for everybody, as long as they have money. Being retired or living a life of leisure, if you're poor, sucks.
Yeah.
Being retired, if you've got enough money, is great. And it's certainly not just a middle-class dream. It's a dream that aristocrats have been living since the year dot. Some of them ran estates and actually did some work to run their estates. Some of them ran empires. But an awful lot of them had no job at all. And they lived the best lives of anybody in their society.
So you think, Calum, the other side of the economic singularity at some point in the future is a world without jobs, potentially?
Yeah, but not in the short term. I don't think this is... machines have to get almost as good and then as good as humans are at most jobs before they can replace us in large numbers. Because say machines are good at doing... Say machines overtake us in half the jobs we do, the economy will expand and humans will all find work to do in that remaining half of the job. So the machines have to get good enough to replace us across most of the economy. That's going to take a while. We'll see it in call centres, we'll see it in driving, we'll see it in warehouses. But it'll be a long time before we see it right across the economy. So that's why I think it's not going to happen, for a generation or so. But what I also think is going to happen is, well before the reality arrives, people will understand it's coming. And I suspect self-driving cars may be the canary in the coal mine. When you see all those cars driving around, and we see them on telly now, but seeing them in real life is different. When you see all those cars driving around doing it themselves, and your friend Bob and your friend Jane don't have a job anymore, you then start to think, actually, these machines are really, really smart, and they're getting smarter very fast. How long before they come after my job? So there'll come a point, and my guess is this is 10 to 15 years from now, when there's a panic. There's a real concern, really widespread concern. Technological unemployment is coming. Eric Schmidt and all the other people running the big tech giants have been either foolish or lying to us. It is coming. What do I do? What I do is I vote for the biggest, nastiest populist who assures me that whatever happens, there will be law and order, and anybody who tries to overthrow law and order will be shot. And that would be a very dangerous outcome. So that's the panic that I worry about.
Yeah, that we're blindly walking or running even as we greedily adopt new technology into a future that in the end, do we want? Maybe we want.
And who owns it? I mean, who owns the platform? As we move down this route, the platform is going to be owned by somebody. not necessarily governments. We've seen the problems with net neutrality being subverted not only by organizations but also by governments, which is a worry. And you then ask, well, who owns the infrastructure of the driverless cars? If we're all don't have jobs, and say we need to earn money, or just to participate, we have to have money. It's a bit like going to Las Vegas with nothing in your wallet. It's not much fun, right? So who owns the who owns the platform? Who owns the infrastructure? And is the house stacked against everyone else?
So there's obviously lots of different models that could evolve. And at one level, as long as we all have access to all the goods and services we need for a really good life, does it matter who owns all the assets? If I can travel wherever I want to, I can easily imagine a future in which lots of people spend most of their time in self-driving mobile homes, and they go to bed at night and they tap in Berlin, and then they wake up in Berlin the next morning and they explore Berlin, and then they go to bed and they tap in Venice, and the next morning they're in Venice and they explore Venice. And they're not paying for anything because the services are virtually free. I can imagine that future, in which case, does it really matter who owns the stuff? Now, it might do, because beyond the economic singularity, there's another big issue coming along, which Yuval Harari has called the situation of the gods and the useless.
That's right.
So all the people who are maybe having a very nice time have no economic function.
Yes.
And there's this small group of people who own all the productive assets and own all the property, perhaps. Now, in the first instance, maybe that doesn't matter too much, but it could begin to matter if, as is very likely, technology continues to accelerate and we continue to invent ways to augment ourselves physically and cognitively. The people with the assets will presumably have privileged access to these technologies. At the moment, it doesn't matter terribly much. It took 10 years for iPhones to go from a plaything of the very rich to being something that loads of people have got. And there's cheap versions of iPhones which are, are engaging people on railway stations in Nairobi. But as technology accelerates, the speed that these new technologies come online will be quicker and quicker and quicker. So it may then begin to matter if you have privileged access. You may actually speciate. So you get one species which is greatly superior to everybody else, the gods and the useless scenario. I think we need to worry about the income problem for the economic singularity before we worry about the gods and the useless situation.
I agree, because that's the technological singularity.
Actually, no, that's a different thing.
Tell me about that.
So that is when we create an artificial general intelligence. So we create a machine which is smarter than the smartest human. And at the moment, as we know, our technology is increasing exponentially. Roughly speaking, machines get twice as good every 18 months. There's no reason to think that's going to stop, and it may even accelerate. So this machine, which is as smart as a human, will get much, much smarter than us, and within a few short years, it will be way smarter than any human has ever been. We need to make sure the first one of those really, really likes us. And
friendly
also,
AI.
A friendly AI. The Friendly AI project, yeah. Now, curiously, there's quite a lot of people working on the Friendly AI project. Not enough, but there are some. There's 4 existential risk organisations, 2 in the UK and 2 in the States, which are working largely on that problem. There's very few people taking seriously the economic singularity, which is an irony.
And that's the one you think you should solve first, or we should solve first?
It's almost certainly coming first,
because
and we're not paying enough attention to it.
How do you deal with ensuring that people have money to be able to participate in the economy that's coming down the line? Who's working on that, other than universal basic income, where we've seen various experiments around the world, mostly failures? Who's working on some of the other alternatives?
Lots of people produce reports about the future of work, and the media's full of stories about it every day. About half of them are saying there's nothing to worry about, move along, it's all hype. And that's the view of the people running the tech giants. They all say, look, automation in the past did not cause lasting widespread unemployment. People thought it would, and it didn't, and therefore it won't happen in the future, which is a ludicrous argument. But what is going to happen in the short term is there's going to be faster and faster job churn. Areas of the economy will get automated and people will have to find new jobs. And as I said, until the machines can do the things that most can do most of the things that humans do for money, then there will be enough jobs for people. But there'll be churn, and people will have to retrain. A lot of people who don't fall for the blandishments of Eric Schmidt and others and say, actually, yeah, there are going to be big changes, agree that we're going to have a churn, and therefore we need to retrain people. We need to have retraining tools available for people. And some people will fall out. Some people won't fancy retraining every year, 2 years, 6 months, and will drop out.
So what are some of the skills that should be focused on now for those, for the generations that's coming through?
Yeah, so the trouble is we don't know. You can see the broad trends in future technology, but you can never work out what order they happen in or how they manifest. For instance, nobody 30 years ago guessed that our phones would become the embodiment of our supercomputers. That is something that nobody guessed. A phone was a thing the size of a small dog tied to the wall that was expensive to use. Now it's a supercomputer in your pocket. It actually, in hindsight, makes perfect sense. We are communicating animals, so yes, of course our most powerful technology would sit in a phone. It makes sense, but nobody forecast it. So we don't know what skills people are going to need in the next 10 years or so. We have to be very flexible and very responsive. For a while, everybody said, let's train everybody in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, maths. And then everybody said, no, actually, that's not right, because coding obviously can be automated. So we need to train everybody in humanities, because what we need to do is be as different from the robots as possible. Well, maybe that's right, or maybe there'll be something else. We're simply going to have to be very flexible and quick to respond, and people are going to have to spot the next opportunity and retrain for it, which is going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
And I think if I'm a leader in an organisation, and my organisation has 10,000, 50,000 or 100,000 plus people in it, that's a pretty scary future that I need to deal with in the next 5 to 10 years. Should I bother training these people? Should I just double down on my technology investment and accelerate the advancement of the robots? Are organisations even configured to operate in this way?
I take a bit of a purist view of this. I think the responsibility of people running commercial organisations is to make their commercial organisations as commercially successful as possible. At the end of the day, I know this is unfashionable, shareholders own that business, and the CEO is a custodian of shareholder value. So what she should be doing is making it as profitable as possible, improving the value. And quite frankly, a lot of the time in the next 10 years or so, that is going to be about automation. If you're running a business with 100,000 people in it now, I'll bet that in 5 years' time you're going to be running a business with 50,000 people in it. So what you have to do is figure out how to do that cost effectively, but also, because you're not a monster and your shareholders aren't monsters,
Sure.
and you have a duty to various other stakeholders, you need to work out how to make that transition as painless for your people as possible, for a bunch of reasons, partly because it's the right thing to do, partly because it's good PR. And so outplacement facilities, in-house training for people to move on to other jobs. There's a whole range of things that you can do to make the transition as easy as possible. And I'm sure that more and more industries will pop up to help that.
If I'm working for an organisation and I'm being automated, and my role is to help automate my organisation, knowing full well that I'm doing myself out of my work in the future, what's the motivation? If I'm the Uber driver, driving my car, knowing essentially I'm basically sitting here waiting for the car to be able to drive itself.
Yeah.
Other than today's earning money, what's my motivation to be part of that change?
And maybe none. And it's interesting, if you talk to Uber drivers, particularly in America, where they're obviously, they're ahead of us in thinking about these things. If you talk to Uber drivers there, they say, yeah, I've probably got about 2 years, maybe 3. And some of them may say 5. But they're quite sanguine about it. They see this job as being something that will last for 2 years. And I think in a world of, continuous disruption, continuous transformation, people will get used to the idea that this job will probably last a year and then I'll end up doing something else. And I don't know what that is yet.
For Uber drivers, maybe. For people working for large, we were in Germany earlier this year, and Germany is one example of a country with organisations of a workforce that have been there for decades, actually. People have been there for many, 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 many years and don't really think of doing anything else. Could they think of doing something else? I don't know. They certainly don't think their job is a 2-year transient experience before they just go on to the next thing.
And some of them will be right, but most of them are going to have to change their minds.
What about when you move into a situation, as soon as somebody creates a family of whatever form and has children, whomever they may be, but wants to create some kind of stability in which they can bring up the next generation and ensure that they survive moving forward, don't you think that creates a bias where people really want some form of stability? They need to send their kids to school, they need to get them educated, they need to have communities, societies to help them make it. All of that requires some level of stability and cash. Where does it come from in the future AI scenario?
I think increasingly there will be less. And we're already quite a long way into this process. I mean, when I started work, which is a very long time ago, I worked for a large organisation, which definitely most people starting there as graduate trainees thought that they'd be there for their entire career. Very few people, I suspect, now go into an organisation thinking they'll be there in 35 years' time.
Or want that.
Or want that.
That's right.
So we're already used to the idea that probably every 5 years or so you change.
Yeah.
And the trick is to remain current in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is to be aware of what's the coming thing, to build your skills so that you're attractive to the employer in that next opportunity.
Yeah.
It'll just get quicker and quicker. But, we're sort of getting used to this acceleration.
And Calum, are there any areas that you think humans can do something that machines won't be able to do? So is there a unique aspect of humanness that we'll retain?
Until we create a machine which is conscious, the one thing we have over them is that they're not conscious and we are. And I take the view that art is the expression of something meaningful about the human condition, being human, being conscious. So by definition, a machine can't create art. It can create stuff that looks a lot like art, and certainly in my case, machines can already create paintings which look a lot more like art than anything I could create. But they're not creating art because they're not conscious. Now, that might not be terribly helpful for most people, but that's one thing. You asked for one thing that it's going to be a long time before they can do, because it's probably going to be a very long time before we create conscious machines.
What is it about consciousness then? So you can have incredibly sophisticated machines, but at what point is something conscious then?
We don't know. We know very little about consciousness, other than that we each have it, and we assume that everybody else has it. We don't know that either, but we assume it.
Yeah. Do we all have consciousness?
Do you all exist?
Well, speak for yourself, George.
I'm just asking.
I'm interested in inherent bias, because I think we know now that as algorithms are becoming more sophisticated, we're discovering that algorithms, you were talking about this earlier, algorithms possess some kind of bias and might be skewing the system in some way at this point, until we figure out how to get to sophisticated enough algorithms that get rid of inherent bias.
Algorithms aren't biased, it's the data that's biased.
Yeah.
And the trick is to de-bias the data. Now, this is not a new problem. This isn't something that machine learning researchers are unaware of. When Amazon discovered that the systems they were using for recruiting were just riddled with bias, because all they had seen, by and large, were male job applicants, so they thought a male job applicant was a good thing and a female job applicant not so good. If you're aware of that source of bias, you can do something about it. And the great thing about bias in machines is you can interrogate it, and you can accuse them of being biased. You try that with a human, you're likely to get a prickly response. And it's humans where the bias comes from.
Back to organisations, do you think, say in 10 years, 20 years' time, as we look forward beyond the economic singularity, will organisations take the same form? Will they take a radically different form than the one we have today? Large office spaces centred around big cities with people commuting in on a congested infrastructure into a single place of work?
If you're talking about when the economic singularities happen, no, because most people won't be doing jobs. There will still be some people making the strategic decisions for organisations and for societies, but most people won't be going to an office. They'll be playing golf or climbing a mountain. But on the route there, will we get more virtual? Will we have fewer people in offices? I don't know. I was in a room with a couple of people, had a very interesting conversation recently. One worked for IBM and the other one worked for Shell. And apparently those two organisations are now pushing back against people doing work from home. They want everybody to come into the office every day, or pretty much every day, because they're finding that the virtual office idea has strained work relationships and has reduced the trust and reduced the familiarity of people between each other. So maybe we're going to carry on until we get to the economic singularity. Maybe we're going to carry on commuting and working in offices. I hope not, because it's a boring thing to do.
Yeah, as long as you do bring people together and not create loneliness and isolating people.
Yeah, bringing them together and then sticking them in cubicles so they don't talk to each other.
Well,
they communicate by email. That's a bit ironic.
Are we going to
isn't
have the death of the open plan office as well?
Well, we had that experience in our business where everybody's allowed to write their own contract, pretty much. They can come in, they can stay at home, they can bring up their kids, they can, as long as they're delivering on the work and delivering the outcomes that we look for. We think that's fair enough. Requires us to be a little bit more logistically savvy and to pay attention to some of the things. But it also means that we got great people working for us who wouldn't otherwise work for us, and older and younger and so on. We like that a lot. But they got to a point where a number of our people were like, I'm tired of working from home. We need a place to come and work from occasionally. So we set up one of those, and they can come in when they need to.
Yeah. So another model that was suggested years ago was that you don't commute into a central office where all of your colleagues are, but because people want sort of a second home that they work from, separate from their home, you have little hubs in your neighbourhood, and people from all sorts of different organisations go and work in those hubs. And maybe things will work that way.
And you're seeing that in WeWork and these sorts of flexible working spaces.
Yeah, exactly. The experiment you're talking about where people write their own contracts, that's something that I think a reasonable number of organisations are trying. There's a company called Sotalia where they are having people do write their own contracts. They do the work they want to do, and they set their own salaries as well. And they do it in consultation with everybody else. So everybody votes on the salary that people propose for themselves, and your vote is weighted according to your importance in the company, or perhaps importance is the wrong word, but the contribution you've made to your company, plus how well you know that person. And that's an intriguing way of managing
algorithm,
things.
If you like,
exactly.
for putting it together.
Exactly.
Reminds me of one of the themes that has emerged from this podcast series is we're talking to one of our previous guests about learning, talking about where the budgets should lie. Should the budgets lie with the organization or with a decentralized organization? He said, why not have the budgets lie with the individuals? And they set up their own learning budgets and they spend it the way they need it. Same thing, set your own salary, set your own terms of reference and what you need to work.
You have to have systems that correct things, obviously, because if you let that run wild, somebody will say, I want £1 million as my training budget.
Sure.
You have to have a reason why that doesn't happen.
Or there's a cap on the kind of spending that you have, but you're able to spend it any which way you want.
Yeah.
Yes, to the question, how do you set that? Where should that cap be? I'm interested in, after the economic singularity, and if it moves then into the technological singularity, what is the role of the human, us people? What will that be in this world?
Well, the easy cop-out answer is that because there's the event horizon, we don't know. And that's also actually the truth. But speculating, I think if we create a machine which is smarter than us and becomes a superintelligence, we will get very despondent if we don't join it. And by that I mean merge with it. If we find that we've created this incredible intelligent machine, even if it just leaves the Earth, says the Earth is a rather small, boring speck and there's a big universe out there I want to go and play, I think we'll get really depressed at the idea that we're so much less smart than it is. Being the second smartest species around is a perilous and grisly business unless you don't know about it. Chimpanzees
exactly. We might be way down.
And typically on the road to extinction.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So chimpanzees are in that position now, but their great good fortune is that they don't know about it.
That's right.
So I think partly to avoid being very depressed, and also to have the remarkable opportunities of being a superintelligence, I think we have to become superintelligences. I think that is our future. And of course, this is a big bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow, because a lot of people think it's very important to remain human. I think it's utterly unimportant to remain human. I think being human simply means you can create new humans in the traditional way, and I think that's the least interesting thing about us. I think the most interesting thing about us is our minds, and if we can move our minds to much better substrates that don't rot and die and aren't limited to this one little vulnerable speck in the universe, that's a great world. So I think, speculating, we should merge with the machines and zoom off around the universe and explore it.
And now we're into crazy metaphysics,
It's
philosophical.
it's big.
space.
Yeah.
We are,
huge.
but we already choose every day to be as close to technology as possible. From holding our phones, through wearing devices, through implanting devices, where people have the opportunity to use technology to better their lives and their existence, they tend to choose to do it.
Yeah.
As you say, in the end, are we, as I said earlier, are we blindly walking into something that in the end is not good for us? Do you choose the future you don't want by misadventure? We don't know. We don't know.
What's a 2030 scenario which is more upbeat for humanity? Is there one?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the one that I think we should be driving towards. It is the leisure society. It's the world in which the whole economy has gone the way music is going, and transportation, housing, energy is almost all free, not completely free, but near to free, and accessible to everybody all over the world. Machines are doing all the jobs, certainly all the boring jobs.
Sure.
A small number of humans are employed making strategic decisions, perhaps being plumbers, perhaps being a plumber is just too twiddly to bother to automate. And everybody else is, as I say, being the best golfer they can or climbing mountains.
I want to explore, Calum, you said the leisure society, which I like this phrase, we're moving towards the leisure society, but I'm also, the alarm bell that immediately went off in my mind was, what about, and I wouldn't know the exact percentage, but probably the 98% of people that don't live in a fairly wealthy life, will they be in the leisure society?
Yes, that's the whole
Or
point.
will they be just cleaning the swimming pools?
No. The whole point is everybody has to go there together. If you have a small section who are living the leisure society, then they're an aristocracy, and that's not a good outcome. And actually, the recent experience is that the wealthier you are, the more talented you are, tends to be the busier you are. People who have less skills and earn less money tend to have more spare time and they spend it watching telly or whatever. But no, in this leisure society that I hope we're heading for, and I hope we're going there anyway, because the economy is being demonetized as it's dematerialized, then everybody is enjoying the leisure society.
So what do we need to focus on to do that if we're going to rise up the masses, not just the few?
If I can add to that, Paul, the thing about the Victorians, again, was that you had a massive moral movement which happened at the same time to counter what they saw as the kind of the satanic mills of the industrialized movement. And the thing about the moral movement was it had lots of values about democracy, lots of values, became Christian democracy very much in Victorian England, and lots of desire to spread and create an equitable society. London School of Economics was set up at the time to educate all of society, to create PhDs for women, and to create a less aristocratic society and a more fair society for all. These were the moral values that were driving alongside the industrial shift that happened. Is it necessary to have some kind of moral position that is persuading most people in society to move towards the vision, toward a leisure society, in order to have that outcome? Is there something that needs to be done ideologically that enables that outcome?
So,
because can we leave it to chance?
Yeah, no, I don't think we can leave it to chance, and I'll come back to what I think we should do, and I'll answer hopefully both of your questions. But just on the Victorian movement towards democracy, that was largely the middle classes saying to the aristocrats, it's our turn to have a share. And the pivotal moment was the repeal of the Corn Laws, when the aristocracy was saying, we want to control the price of corn because land is the most important thing because it's what we own. And the middle classes were saying, well, hell that, we want free prices for corn and we want a share in power. And that's what happened in the Victorian era. Democracy was very restricted. It was the aristocracy and the middle classes. And it wasn't until the 20th century that you started to have a powerful movement, the labour movement, fighting against the appalling conditions of the early and mid-industrial society, economy, and going for universal suffrage. And then after that, female suffrage. Now, what do we need to do to have the leisure society come to fruition? As I say, I think the economy is going to go just driven by technology and driven by, effectively, iron laws of of economics, the iron hand, the invisible hand, towards dematerialized, demonetized situation. I think the thing that we need to do is to avoid the panic, because right now, if you say to people in 30 years' time, almost everything will be almost free, they say you're completely bonkers. That's the reaction I generally get, and I understand that's fair enough. When people think, self-driving cars show that technological automation is a real possibility, I think it will lead to a panic. So what I think we have to do is get people to take seriously the possibility of technological unemployment. We don't know for sure it's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't guarantee it. I just think it's quite likely. And take seriously the possibility that it could happen, and then start planning for what happens if it does happen. And if I'm right and we're heading for this dematerialized, demonetized economy, the economy of radical abundance, the Star Trek economy, then if we all believe that's going to happen, we don't have to have the panic. If, on the other hand, we just think, oops, technological unemployment's coming, and we don't see the possibility of the Star Trek economy, then we'll have a panic. And we will have a panic in which something a lot worse than President Trump will be elected.
So we need more than, but at least a marketing effort on the positive side of the other side of the singularity, not the negative, just the negativity that we're seeing at the moment, where how many jobs are we going to lose?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so first of all, we need to clear away some of the denial, to get people to stop saying that technological unemployment can't happen because automation hasn't caused unemployment in the past, therefore it can't in the future. That's a non sequitur of an argument. So to get rid of the denial, and then to get people to agree that if it is going to happen, it can have a good outcome.
I've just got one final question for each of you, please. We'll start with you, Calum. How can we ensure we build a future world that we want to live in?
So we don't know the precise shapes that these technologies are going to take as they go forward. We have to be flexible. We have to be ready for anything. I think the best thing that we can all do to start with is to educate ourselves in what these technologies mean today and what they're likely to mean tomorrow. And that means reading and absorbing as much information as you can. So I think the most important thing that everybody should do is read your book and read my books.
Excellent. Thank
How
you.
do you top that? I honestly think that there is required a secular moral revolution in some respects that can provide a set of values that we think are fundamentally human and also transhuman, but a set of values that can guide the kinds of things we need, like friendly and AI and so on, so that the coding that is done now has an inherent bias within it that leads to an outcome. I don't think these things can be left to chance. I don't think they should be left to self-organization. I think we need to have a secular, moral, inherent bias within the coding that goes on now to get us to the leisure society we're looking for.
Thank you. And Paul?
I love what Elon Musk said recently, where he said, I'd love to, wouldn't it be great if I could have been born on Earth but die on Mars, just hopefully not on impact. And I think it's a similar point about the singularity. We don't want to get there and die on impact. And so as we build towards that, it's making sure that we're putting the things in place today and learn quickly as we go, so that we are curating continually the type of world that we want to move towards, and find ways to correct and course correct as we do so. I think I'm very fearful of blindly walking into something that we really don't want in the end, but optimistic that, as Calum says, by educating and by essentially marketing the positive side and painting that positive future that perhaps we do want, then that's the future we walk towards.
So I just want to say thank you so much, Paul, Garrick, and our guest, Calum Chase, for this fantastic conversation today. You've been listening to a Ludic podcast. It's called Alive, Digital Humans and Their Organizations. Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on this and joining us the next time.